You know, it's kind of sad. Summer is finally over. But, hey, another summer, another film season. And honestly, I've had a lot of time on my hands. A lot of time. So the way I spend most of my summers is going to the movies, and I decided instead of making that the sad, lonely thing that it really is, I thought I'd do something about it. So here you go, a review of every movie that I've seen this summer in chronological order. This is my summer at the movies. Every summer season has that one movie that kicks it all off, and this summer, it was The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, I've always loved Spider-Man. He's a fun character to follow, and all the films have a certain standard of quality to them. This movie was fun to watch, but I felt that something about it wasn't nearly as good as the predecessor. The film's tone is a lot lighter, but it definitely had its moments of hard-hitting emotional scenes. The scenes between Gwen and Peter were fantastic, and it was awesome to see Spider-Man going through his tough decisions. But at the same time, there was just something off about it.
Nice arms. It's just the wrist, just on the wrist, buddy.
There were a lot of moments that I felt were rushed or just plain boring. Everything about the end was also just terrible, with the last 10 minutes killing everything the movie set out to do. Hell, I think it could have been the start of another film entirely. This film was essentially just the teaser for the Sinister Six movie, with Electro being a rushed villain and given a poor backstory, and hell, he's barely a character to begin with. Also, the ending trailer for Days of Futures Past was there for just a bullshit reason. Google the story if you had a chance. 6 out of 10.
We have the power now.
As you guys know, I am a gigantic Godzilla fan, and I was excited to see the 30th film with his name on it. Gareth Edwards did a fantastic job with the movie Monsters, so I was excited to see how he would handle the Godzilla series. And as a huge fan of the series, this is exactly what I wanted out of the movie. The monster fights were amazing, and it was a side of Godzilla that we've never really seen before. It was done in an oddly realistic way, which is weird to say about Godzilla, but fuck off, you know what I mean. The film was told from the human's perspective rather than a mix, with everything seeming entirely destructive in a way that Godzilla's never really done before. It was explosive, brilliantly done, and to me, exactly what I wanted out of a Godzilla film. Even to those who aren't fans of the Big G, I still feel you can find enjoyment in this film in some aspect. 9 out of 10.
And I have a right to know!
This movie was surprisingly hilarious. From the trailer, I expected Neighbors to be a stupid, raunchy film that does its best to tell one joke after the other for 2 hours until the credits roll and you leave dissatisfied. The movie turned out to be a pretty genius look at what it means to grow up from 2 different perspectives. The movie works for parents who are afraid that their lives will end after having a child, as well as for college students who are unsure about their lives after college. Above that, I found it actually really funny, keeping me laughing even when I was watching it a second time. Did I mention I watched it twice? Because I kind of watched it twice. My only problem with it is by the end, I didn't really know who to root for. But at the same time, I think that was the overall point of the movie. I wholeheartedly recommend watching this when you have a chance. 8 out of 10.
Anyway,
Ted is a movie that I hold close to my heart. I feel it's one of the smartest comedies to be written in a long time. After that, I was excited to see how A Million Ways to Die in the West would turn out, and all the trailers really held my interest. Watching it, however, really disappointed me. Seth MacFarlane's second directed film was smart in certain ways, but really falls short in many others. The story was fun, but the entire film was built around a single idea.
there are a million ways to die in the West.
It's a concept, not a story, and it gets dragged out and doesn't hold the entire film together. Unlike Ted, a majority of the greatest jokes of the film were shown in all the trailers, leaving a pretty weak story to hold your interest the entire time. If you're a fan of Seth, you'll probably enjoy it, but if you aren't already, this is not the film for you. 4 out of 10.
People die at the fair.
People die at the fair.
Now, I don't usually read books. It's an awful thing to say, but hey, it's true. books just aren't my thing. It may be my inner film major talking, but I prefer films, and I feel that books are spoilers for their respective movies. But because of a girl and a story that doesn't have a happy ending for me, I ended up reading the book beforehand, as well as catching an early screening of this film. Now, everyone was giving the book raving reviews, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't the best thing. But everyone on YouTube is screaming about just how perfect the movie is, as if it's a sin to hate it because of the fact that it was adapted from a novel by one of the Vlog brothers.
This movie's actually based off of a book written by John Green. I don't know if you know who John Green is, or that YouTube channel Vlog Brothers, which is what he's from, or his...
Based on the best-selling book of the same name by, I can't believe I'm saying this, my friend and fellow YouTuber John Green.
To me, I will say it wasn't a terrible film. It was surprisingly good. It's just so far from perfect, and it wasn't nearly as emotional as every 15-year-old girl is making it seem. It was a pretty straight romantic comedy that happened to be about cancer survivors. And that was essentially it. It didn't break any new ground anywhere, and it was played fairly straight. It was emotional when it needed to be, and it hit the cancer aspect really well. But the love story is done like every other romance movie and comes off as pretentious, cliche, and at times even cringeworthy.
You two are so adorable. We're just friends.
Oh, she is. I'm not.
Now, this is the only time I bring up the book when comparing it to a film, but it will help me state my point. The book is about a teenager surviving and fighting cancer who happen to fall in love, while the film is a love story between two characters with cancer. See, those are two entirely different stories with entirely different focuses. What saved the movie for me was Shailene Woodley, who made the entire film fantastic with her performance. Her portrayal, raw emotions, and charisma as the character was fantastic, and it honestly made me want to watch some of her other stuff. And then I rewatched part of Secret Life of the American Teenager and just projectile vomited on my wall. Overall, I would give it a watch if you have a chance, but no need to rush if rom-coms aren't really your style. Especially since there are so many better ones out there. This one gets a 6 out of 10, sadly.
It's just a shout into the void and that oblivion is inevitable. And I am in love with you.
Every summer has a billion cookie-cutter action films that keep getting released to keep the usual movie-going audience happy with an explosion without really thinking about what's going on. That is what I went in expecting. But this wasn't it. That came later. What I got was a surprisingly fun film that made me enjoy it in a lot of ways. The story isn't the most original thing on the planet, but it leads to a very different take on the usual sci-fi war genre that we're all used to. While it does fall into some of the usual cliches, it does make up for it in a lot of ways, and hell, it was really smart the way the story was told. I really enjoyed this movie's script, emotions, and action, too. I felt the ending was really stupid and really made no sense to the film's own logic, but hey, it was still a fun journey to get there. I totally recommend checking it out if you're bored and need something to watch, and hey, maybe you'll even be surprised like I was.
How did you do that?
8 out of 10.
Come find me when you wake up.
Maleficent was just terrible. The movie was meant to be a look into Maleficent as a character, because in Sleeping Beauty, her character is flat and boring as holy hell. But there was a reason to it. It was a fairy tale story. The villain was written to be a mustache twirler on purpose. There wasn't supposed to be anything redeemable about her. She was supposed to be evil incarnate. I gave this movie a chance because Wicked managed to characterize its evil incarnate character very well while still staying very true to the original story. But where that didn't change anything major from The Wizard of Oz, Maleficent feels the need to change the most important parts of the fairy tale in order to paint Maleficent as something she isn't. A good guy. But even then, I couldn't find anything redeemable about her, nor anyone in this film for that matter. I hated every character in this movie, mainly because of the poor story, writing, and characterization. Even Maleficent I had a hard time liking because of the way her character was written. The only real redeemable part about this film is the costuming of Maleficent and the scene recreation of the curse scene in the original film. If you want a fun night, get a bunch of friends, a few beers, and watch this movie. Trust me, you will have a blast. 2 out of 10.
Fight with me now.
To me, X-Men is a series that I've always just kind of enjoyed. I love every single film in the series, even the ones that kinda suck. And I can wholeheartedly say that this is one of my favorite X-Men films of all time. The entire cast did a fantastic job, with notable praise going to James McAvoy. I loved Wanted, and he did a fantastic job in First Class, but this movie really showed me his acting range and really makes me want to watch his other films. Filth the movie, not, well, garbage. You get what I mean. The film also did something interesting with the canon of the film series, which is something I wasn't expecting, but it was honestly pretty fucking awesome. It's honestly a cool way to end the story of our original cast members, while still allowing for new stories to be told with the younger versions. The only thing really holding this film back is the fact that it has so much sequel baggage to it. I loved this film, and outside of a few continuity issues of the overall film series that stuck out to me, it is easily one of the best comic book movies to come out in recent memory. 9 out of 10.
This is gonna be fun.
See, there was one day during the summer where I treated myself to a double feature. After watching X-Men, I ran into a few friends and we decided to watch 22 Jump Street. 21 Jump Street was a genius film in its own right, and the Lego Movie sold me on the directing duo Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. And this movie shocked me even more. Everything about this movie was just genius and blew my mind with all the super meta, self-aware comedy that I wasn't expecting at all. The movie knew exactly what it wanted to be and turned over everyone's expectations throughout every aspect of the film. This is one of the smartest movies I have seen in recent memory, and the pace of the comedy is continuous and hilarious. You need to see this movie as soon as you can, whether or not you've watched the original. Trust me, I give this a perfect 10 out of 10.
We drink alcohol.
Are you two fucking around in school again? It's the same case. Do the same thing.
The first How to Train Your Dragon movie was a fantastic animated film in a way that surprised the holy hell out of me. I avoided the TV shows, and don't worry, you don't need to know anything about it to really understand this film. Or the first film for that matter. How to Train Your Dragon 2 managed to stand on its own without relying on the first one too much. The film got to a part of my inner child that has a need for adventure and, well, dragons. It was a rip-snorting adventure movie that was mixed with beautiful animation that really makes the entire world come alive. Some of the parts in the movie you could argue was shot in real life. I loved this movie, and the story itself was actually pretty emotional and well done. There were some parts that I had a problem with, like the role of an alpha in the nest, but the only reason I had a problem with that was because of the stuff portrayed in the first movie. If this movie wasn't a sequel, I would probably be rating this a perfect 10 out of 10, but sadly, again because of sequel baggage, I have to give it a 9 out of 10. But hey, if you have a chance, check it out still. I absolutely loved this movie.
I bet you think you know a lot about dragons. Let me show you some of what you don't know.
Dayon and I like getting bored and watching whatever's in theaters at the time. You know Dayon, that redheaded dude right there. Yeah, that's him. I love him. Many of the movies we watched on this list, we watched it together. We watched Think Like a Man 2 because we wanted to watch a movie that we knew would be absolute shit. And holy fuck, this movie friggin' delivered. I didn't watch the first movie at all, but I could tell the entirety of the stereotypes that populated this movie within the first 15 minutes. Dayon and I predicted the end of the movie based on the first scenes that introduced each character. And those characters aren't really interesting at all, nor do they really develop in any way. And then there is this motherfucker, Kevin fucking Hart. I have no idea why people like him. I have never watched a movie with him that I liked, ever. Every movie he's in, he's a loud, obnoxious black guy. And that is his entire character. He is literally a black Rob Schneider. And I hated him in this movie more than I have anything else. He's the reason why all the events in this movie happen, and the movie essentially just shits on his character and expects you to feel absolutely sympathetic to him, and no! I just can't, okay? God, fuck, I hated this movie. 1 out of 10. A fucking 1. Let that sink in. Transformers is a series that literally ended. In a series like this, when your villain dies, you stop. Just stop. But Transformers Age of Extinction picks up where the last movie left off in a way I like to call a pseudo-reboot. A pseudo-reboot is when you distance yourself from the originals to make something different in tone, while still calling back to some characters and still staying a part of the same series. Good examples of this are Terminator 4 and The Wolverine. They painted a bleak and awesome atmosphere with the new characters that actually seem to have, well, depth. And this allowed for a cool look at a damaged Optimus Prime and Autobot crew giving up on humanity and wanting to go home. But after a while, it falls into the usual Bay-isms and becomes like the rest of the films, where it's nameless Autobots fighting against waves of nameless Decepticons. I do enjoy Mark Wahlberg a lot more than I did sequel Shia LaBeouf, but the rest of the humans, minus Stanley Tucci to an extent, are terrible. I hated the daughter character entirely, and the boyfriend was a generic shithead copy and pasted from every high school shithead movie out there. And this movie even tries to justify pedophilia. Like, no joke, there is a scene that is based solely on defining the characters' ages and cracking jokes about it, and has no bearing to the plot at all. Also makes you feel uncomfortable because she's supposed to be 17 and she gets over-sexualized the entire film in a way that only Michael Bay knows how to do. This movie failed at every turn after its first half hour, minus the action scenes. Transformers to me is excellent for its over-the-top badass spectacle, but at the same time it seemed off and didn't wow me like the other films did. But the one thing I will praise it for are the Dinobot scenes, cause holy fuck! God damn, that's just awesome! I'll give Michael Bay a little bit of slack on this, considering he really didn't want to do this movie, and it's also really obvious how much he phoned it in while you watch it. And believe it or not, I'm actually a Michael Bay fan. This gets a 3 out of 10.
We need a new army.
Tammy is a movie that was absolutely confused about what it wanted to be. Most of Melissa McCarthy's movies since Bridesmaids have always put her brand of over-the-top antics and personality as part of the movie. But this was the first time she was ever the center of attention in a film. Even with The Heat, her movie from last summer, she played off of Sandra Bullock the entire movie. And surprisingly, she just can't hold the film together. The movie was slow and barely got a laugh out of us, and was generally just boring. The story got dark at times, which kind of made me connect with the characters more than that other stupid comedy. For real, that was just fucking terrible. But the film's tone goes from very over-the-top loudness to these dark, very real scenes that just got jarring and awkward. I wasn't the biggest fan of this, but I'm pretty sure someone else could get enjoyment out of it. Just don't go in expecting a gigantic comedy fest like McCarthy's past work, because this is as far from that as you can get. 3 out of 10.
Oh my god. You're pregnant. I'm driving a car.
Now, I loved the original Planet of the Apes, and I loved Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And Dawn of the Planet of the Apes absolutely blew me away. This movie was essentially flawless when it comes to the aspects that are important to the message, as well as furthering the story. You see, Transformers, this is a sequel. This is a fucking sequel to a movie. Hell, I'll even argue that this is the same style of pseudo-reboot you're trying to have, considering of how far it tries to distance itself from its predecessor by having a different tone and loosely connecting itself to the first film. It was really awesome at showing the duality of nature and really brings up a great question. At what point do we consider something intelligent? And what will our first reaction be to this intelligence? Above raising these questions, I just love the characters. Caesar is a great character and is absolutely beautifully portrayed on screen. Hell, I'll go as far as to say that this is possibly the best character of every movie on this list. Andy Serkis deserves an award for bringing this ape to life, as well as just giving a fucking amazing performance. This movie in no way requires you to watch Rise of the Planet of the Apes, but it helps you understand the motivations of the characters a bit better. But at the same time, this film does a fantastic job reintroducing all of the characters that are important to this plot. Go give this movie money now. This movie gets a 10 out of 10 for me.
Caesar, home. This is your home. Your home.
Begin Again is another one of those movies that I just watched on a whim. I had absolutely no idea what it was up until an hour before we saw it, and I'm honestly really happy that we did. The poster for this movie doesn't do it justice and makes it seem like it's going to be a stupid generic romantic comedy film. But I was entirely wrong. This film was very original, fun to watch, and was just absolutely gorgeous. It was a musical that has very beautifully done songs, cinematography, and just raw human emotions. It was a pretty fun and emotional film that got away from the usual film conventions quickly. My only real problem with it was how abrupt the ending was. While watching it, I thought there was going to be another half hour or something. But no, the entire movie gets resolved very quickly, which is sad because I was really into the film and its characters. They added some pretty large scenes during the credits, which honestly kind of added to the overall abruptness of the ending. But the rest of the film spends its time focusing on the music and the emotions, which is all a film like this really needs. I bought the soundtrack and I loved the acoustic indie style that this music has, and that also applies to the cinematography and the rest of the film itself. While it's not the best movie, it's one I recommend because I promise you won't get a movie like this for a while. This movie gets a solid 8 out of 10, and I totally recommend the soundtrack. Trust me.
Every song we do in a different location.
Under the bridge.
Chinatown.
Rowing boats in Central Park.
Whatever happens, we record it.
If we get arrested,
keep rolling.
Fuck, are we even halfway through this? Ugh.